In the main console room of the TARDIS, the Doctor frowns. He paces about the room, staring at the slowly pumping central column. Pausing to throw one end of his scarf over his shoulder, he appears to examine every panel of the console in minute detail, until he spots a single throw switch, and a look of realization creeps up across his features, followed by a broad, triumphant grin. He flicks the switch into an alternate position, and the grin melts away instantly, leaving him looking positively depressed. He grabs roughly at his enormous hat as if to confirm its continued presence, but even the texture of the cloth under his palm seems to cast him into deeper gloom. The Doctor spins around, away from the console, and at the same time drops into a crouch. A small metal dog has crept up behind him, making only a moderate amount of noise as it glides over the incredibly smooth floor. The Doctor cups its head in his hands. "K9, he says, a prelude to some momentous statement. K9 whirs and chatters in anticipation, but remains otherwise mute. Everything is working perfectly, the Doctor whispers with an intense stare. "Affirmative, Master," K9 chirrups. His radars spin, though whether it is with delight or irritation, it's hard to tell. "Perfectly," the Doctor repeats, a little more calmly, rising to his feet as he does so. "It's all far too positive. I don't like it one bit." He looks down. "K9, can you sense anything unusual?" As the dog chatters and whirs, cogitating on the problem, the Doctor makes himself a cup of tea. He sips at it, but it does nothing to settle his mind. He peers into the gently swirling brown liquid, gradually being drawn closer to the mug, his eyes taking on an increasingly fixed appearance. He takes another sip. "Negative, Master." The Doctor places his mug on the central column, which rises and falls gently. He shakes his head. "No, this is very bad." He tenses, waiting. Nothing happens. He sighs impatiently, then strides to the other side of the console, and stands with the tails of his long coat swinging gently to rest, his hands on his hips. Nothing happens. Except that this time, nothing really does happen. Suddenly, violently, the Doctor is thrown into utter blackness, an absence of light, sound, even gravity. He feels that sickening, yawning sensation in the pit of his stomach that usually comes while falling, only this time he knows that he is not, as the usual rushing tear of air that accompanies that experience is missing. Almost as he thinks this, he feels the wind begin to tear past his face. "Ah, that's much better!" he shouts into the teeth of the gale, bearing his own in a broad smile. He now finds that he has to hold tightly onto his hat in order to stop it being whipped up into the inky blackness. All the while he can hear his scarf and coat flapping in a distressed manner, but of course he can see nothing. At first the Doctor feels the usual animal fear that accompanies the sensation of freefall, but very quickly he begins to find the whole experience quite exhilarating. Naturally, it crosses his mind that he might well eventually fall into something, but he thinks it best not to succumb to wild speculation over things he knows nothing about. These thoughts have barely passed through his mind when he begins to discern vague grey shapes in the direction that can be best described as down, to judge from the direction of the wind. The Doctor's sense of direction receives further confirmation as the grey mass draws closer and grows clearer. It is a vast plain of a particularly hard-looking form of granite. As if to relieve the monotony, excitingly pointy extrusions are thrown up periodically from its otherwise flat surface. The Doctor frowns as he wonders how the plain is being illuminated given the vast distance he has fallen through utter darkness. Then he brightens, as he realizes that in about 10 seconds, judging by his present speed, this worry will no longer be troubling him. He spreads his arms wide, closes his eyes, and beams as he embraces his imminent fate. The Doctor feels solid rock beneath him, and is startled to discover that his feet are not embedded in his ribcage. He opens his eyes, and instantly wishes he had not. He is now in a cave, roughly 100 meters in diameter, with no immediately visible means of escape. This is not what has struck him as unappealing, however. The half-dozen or so humanoid creatures are not entirely pleasant, particularly given that they are not entirely whole. Each is missing 1 or 2 limbs. They whimper and moan as they drag their bodies painfully across the floor. Every missing limb has left behind a torn and ragged wound. No surgeon's work, this. But even this is not the most disturbing feature of the cave. The huge mound of teeth and claws quivering with furious power is. The creature raises its red and drooling snout and sniffs curiously. The Doctor feels a shiver run through him as he begins to guess how the other occupants of the cave have come to lose weight so dramatically. One of the aliens, who has dragged himself furthest from the slathering beast, and by happy chance is closest to the Doctor, looks up at him with pain-filled eyes and speaks in a voice cracked with terror. "He smelt you! He's coming! He always wants new unspoiled flesh! He will take you, eat you, as he's eaten all of us! As he's still eating all of us!" This last statement is delivered almost as a screech, but the Doctor is able to understand him clearly enough. Unfortunately, the sound has also enabled the beast to locate the Doctor more quickly, and it is rapidly propelling itself towards him on 6 taloned legs. The Doctor pushes his mounting fear aside, studies the beast for a moment, scans the cave for somewhere to hide, then, finding nowhere, wraps his scarf around his head. He is not sure what he hopes to achieve by this. Perhaps it is to confuse the creature until it loses interest, or possibly he simply wishes to block out the terrifying vision that faces him. All is silent now. The noise of the approaching creature has abated. The Doctor waits another 10 seconds, then cautiously lifts the scarf away from his eyes. The beast takes his arm off just above the right elbow. The sheer intensity of the pain is something for which the Doctor was not entirely ready. He screams as white-hot searing fire rolls up from his bleeding stump, washing through every facet of his mind. He sinks to the floor, panting and rocking, while the creature chews thoughtfully. It then returns to the other side of the cave to sleep off its meal. The Doctor composes his thoughts with an effort, pushing the pain away to be stored for later study. "Physician, heal thyself," he mutters as he wraps his scarf around the stump. Slowly he turns to regard the nearest of his fellow amputees. The man stares back at him fearfully. "I really think we should try and find a way out of here," the Doctor says, flashing the man a reassuring if slightly pained grin. The man flinches nervously, as if the Doctor might try to bite him. "There is no way out of here," he hisses, while furtively glancing towards the beast. The Doctor frowns and is about to suggest an alternative course of action when it suddenly ceases to be his problem. For a second he senses a swirling darkness, but he cannot focus upon an image. The Doctor now finds himself in a far more comfortable situation. He is sitting in a chair facing a dresser, complete with a mirror. He notes happily that his arm is now restored to him, but is puzzled to find that it is rather more wrinkled than he is used to. Squinting back at him from the mirror is a reflection that is also more wrinkled than he is used to, an old man, still obviously his current regeneration, but physically wasted with age. Much of his hair is gone, and his skin is patched with liver spots. "Hello." He smiles at the other him, and nods in a friendly manner. The image returns his toothless smile and greeting. The Doctor decides to explore this new experience and his surroundings, and he attempts to get out of his chair. His arms can barely lift him an inch above the cushion, and he can feel that his legs lack the strength to raise him to his feet. He sinks back, wheezing, into the chair, which rolls half a foot or so away from the dresser, carrying him with it. "A wheelchair!" he chuckles to himself. "Hardly my usual form of transport." He hears footsteps and voices, struggles to turn the chair to face his visitors. "Now, Doctor, you know you're not supposed to overexert yourself." This admonishment comes from one of the 2 young female nurses who have just entered the room. The one who had addressed him is tall, pretty, and blonde, while her colleague is shorter, with a more mousy appearance. The Doctor nods in gracious acquiescence as the mousy nurse moves behind him to hold on to the handles of his chair. She bends down close to his ear and says loudly, "It's time for your dinner!" The Doctor raises an arthritic finger to point towards the door. "Then onwards, good ladies," he commands with theatrical grandeur. The effect is spoiled slightly by the croak in his voice. As they wheel him down the corridor, the nurses chat to one another. "Why did you call him the Doctor?" the mousy nurse asks. "I thought he was just another one of the patients." The blonde nurse tuts at her friend's ignorance before explaining. "He was a great doctor once, but that was 20 years ago. Now we're the ones doing the caring, and all he has to do is relax." The Doctor turns his head to regard the blonde nurse out of the corner of his eye. I'm still here, you know, he reminds her. Of course you are, dear, she said in a professionally soothing tone, before continuing to chat with her friend. The doctor ignores them both as he considers the situation, theorizing about what intelligence may be causing it, and what barriers he can throw up to defend himself. By now he has reached the dining room, and is gently pushed into place amongst the ranks of the infirm. Looking down, he sees a plate of mushy stew, a side order of sloppy vegetables, and a spoon. "Do you think you'll be able to manage on your own, Doctor?" the blonde nurse asks him. He grins at her. "I'm sure you'd help me if I couldn't," he replies with a wink. Another thought strikes him. In this state of decrepitude he should have regenerated by now. Obviously, by some unknown force of will, he is expected to remain in this condition. He is troubled by this thought, thinking he will not like the restrictions this new aged condition will impose upon him. Then he shrugs to himself. He is certain this will result in a plethora of hitherto unexplored experiences. Without warning, the Doctor's universe makes a jump cut to another scene. He now sits, his usual healthy, vigorous self, in surroundings that are once again abstractly familiar. The 6 feet square room he now occupies is a sterile white, and every surface has been quilted for his comfort, enjoyment, and safety. It is the archetypal padded cell. Looking down now at his now restored body, the Doctor discovers that he is clothed in nothing except white pyjamas. He stands up and looks around. There does not seem to be any sign of a door or window. Even the bright, cold light source seems entirely hidden to him. He walks clockwise around the cell before retracing his steps. He does not, after all, want to get lost. This exercise over, he sits down and waits. After about an hour, he has begun to guess that this new state is in some way meant to be permanent. The walls seem almost to frown with the effort of just being immutable. La, the Doctor sings out the single note. La, la, la. These 3 notes follow the first, and all are of the same duration and pitch. There is now a significant pause before the Doctor repeats the 4 identical notes again. By the 3rd repetition of the notes, it becomes clear that the significance of the pause is that it consists of 4 rests equal in length to the notes. The Doctor maintains this behaviour for what seems like an age, but it is probably only 15 minutes. Just as he inhales in preparation for another burst, he feels a change in the air accompanied by a strange rustling. In one corner of the room, an eerie, swirling shape has begun to appear. At first, a wisp of black smoke spirals up near the floor, growing to become about 6 feet tall. The apparition, while still smoke-like in form, has the vague suggestion of a shape to it, that of a cowled humanoid figure. Its voice echoes oddly, as if at a distance or located in another, more acoustically resonant room. "What are you doing?" it asks, puzzled. The Doctor smiles and stands up. "I was composing a song," he says with a grin. "But," the entity begins. "Yes?" the Doctor inquires, tilting his left ear towards it. "It has only 1 note." "Ah, but of course," the Doctor cries. "Isn't it always best to start off simply and build up from there?" "What do you mean?" the entity probes, a hint of anger entering its voice. "Well, I mean, once I'd fully explored all the interesting facets of the 1-note song, I could then have moved on to the dizzying heights of the 2-note song. You can see there's an inexhaustible musical realm to be explored here, can't you?" It suddenly becomes very dark, and the Doctor can almost feel the entity's anger as an increase in the air pressure. He realizes that he is not quite immersed in total blackness. He can see he is standing on a slightly reflective hard floor, but he cannot see any walls or other physical features in any direction. Indeed, he is struck by an impression that he is standing upon an infinite plane, although he knows that this is impossible. He notes with some pleasure that he is again dressed in his own clothes, scarf draped around his shoulders, hat sprawling once more upon his head. In spite of the reduced lighting, the Doctor can just make out the swirling shape of the entity. Now it speaks. "You know," it says accusingly, "you know what is happening, don't you? You know why you're here." The Doctor frowns and adopts an expression of modesty. Oh no, you credit me with too much. I don't even know the name of the entity to whom I'm speaking. I'd imagine you have the advantage of me there. We have no need of names, you and I, the entity responds. The doctor raises an eyebrow. But you do know me? He asks. Better perhaps than you know yourself. The doctor brightens upon hearing this, flashing a toothy grin at the entity. Really? Then I've no doubt you could be of inestimable service to me. There are so many things I should like to know. Again, the doctor can physically feel the anger in the atmosphere close about him. I be of service to you? You are so far wide of the mark, you make me wonder if you even now realize what you have done. And this would be one of those parts of myself I don't know, I suppose, the doctor asks politely. The entity fumes. Do you know why I brought you here? It roars, while still maintaining the odd, removed quality to its voice. The doctor smiles. From what you've said, do you think that's likely? The entity appears to subside slightly, to become cooler, more controlled. Have you any idea of the fear you have caused? It asks quietly. The doctor is genuinely taken aback by this. I have caused you fear? Comes the puzzled question. Yes, the entity responds with venom, and not just me, but millions, billions of others throughout time and space. The doctor finds this hard to take in. Now look, I know that when I get out of bed in the morning my hair can look pretty frightful, but still. Do not trivialize the suffering of others, the entity screams, especially when you are their tormentor. The doctor becomes sober. I have never terrorized innocents. It is against everything I am. No, it is all you are, all you have done. You are fear's messiah. Worse, you are the form made flesh. After this outburst, the entity calms itself before continuing. Have you never considered the consequences of your meddling? Have you never understood the ripples your actions create, spreading and growing to become tidal waves that engulf entire worlds? Entire worlds thrown into chaos as old orders collapse to be replaced by the new. Unemployment, hunger, riots, wars, all these things the common people suffer, all these things they fear to come to pass, and you have created them. Fear. When I say billions, I do not bandy these numbers around lightly. You have forced fear upon all these people. The doctor considers this. I've only ever acted against the evil of others, he states simply. The entity utters a humorless laugh. So you encourage an uprising on a subject planet in a galactic empire, an uprising that successfully throws off the Imperial control. You'd count that one world's freedom as a success. Sounds like a fair day's work to me, the doctor agrees. But you don't bother to find out the effect that has on the stable, peaceful and prosperous empire spanning thousands of worlds, do you? The economy falters, dissent breaks out, law and order vanish to be replaced by chaos, uncertainty and, of course, fear. Billions of ordinary people fearing what the next day will bring, and this is but one example from one of your actions. The doctor looks concerned but unrepentant. I still must believe it is for the best. And who are you to decide a therapeutic course of terror for the universe? The entity scoffs, then laughs to itself. Still, that's exactly what I intend to administer. The light of understanding begins to dawn within the doctor's mind. A mind that he is taking increasing pains to shield from the entity. These trials, the doctor says quietly, each one has been an attempt to induce fear within me, correct? Exactly, the entity replies. I wish to trap you in a permanent state of fear. Ah, the doctor says knowingly, for revenge. For justice, the entity snarls. For myself and the billions of common people like me. Excuse me, the doctor interrupts, but you don't seem all that common to me. All this, he gestures around him to all that the entity has created. Once I was, but for reasons that don't concern you, I came to my present state," the entity says, then pauses. When next it speaks, its voice sounds as if it is barely 6 inches away from the doctor's face. "Or perhaps it does," it hisses. "So," the doctor continues, "for justice, you want to scare me?" The entity tuts. "Not just scare you. I want to trap you in a constant state of fear. The fear that traps the lives of those you touch will become your ultimate governor, the force that stays your hand and saves the universe." The doctor nods. "So, fear of falling amended to fear of hitting the ground, a further tweak to fear of physical pain, or perhaps fear of mutilation. I'm thinking, of course, of the beast. Then you attempted to hold up a bogeyman I've never really faced, old age. Finally, an interesting choice, boredom, confinement, lack of stimulus. Yet none of these seemed able to sustain that which you desired. What went wrong?" he asks. "You, of course," snaps the entity. "You did not react as you were supposed to. In every case, you overcame or suppressed your fear. You reveled in every experience and seemed almost to enjoy them. And even when I removed all external stimuli, you still found a method of amusing yourself." The doctor sighs and smiles. "Oh, well, you're never really alone with a good tune. And besides," he says, gesturing around him, "the mind is such a wonderfully creative thing." "And so I revealed myself to you. It was becoming harder to read any thoughts from you. I must know that one thing you fear, so I may confront you with it for all eternity." The doctor frowns. "I've already told you," he says slyly. "What?" the entity cries incredulously. "What my greatest fear is." "You have not! What is it?" the entity insists. "Well, I said I stand against the evil of others." "Yes?" "And we tend to fight against our fears, lest we are overcome by them," the doctor continues. "Yes," the entity repeats. "So perhaps my greatest fear is you," the doctor says with a flourish. The entity screams in rage. It flies around the doctor like a whirlwind, then is instantly still. "We shall see," it hisses in his ear. Then the doctor is careering through an ever-changing landscape of macabre images. Creatures leap out, gibbering, to grab at him as he flies over an undulating plain of purple flesh. Next he is submerged in an ocean of blood, while mermaids sing of the suffering he has caused. Now maggots chew at dozens of rotting wounds scattered over his body as he lies on a stony plain, the sky on fire above him. The images change faster now, and with his own physical orientation, so that he is literally tumbling through time and space. But for all his disorientation, he still does not feel that one thing the entity desires: fear. As the jumble of sensations grows too fast to separate, his only concern is that he might lose... No. He pushes that thought deep down within him. Creation stops turning. The doctor is standing once more on the dark expanse, the seemingly infinite obsidian plain. "So that was it," the entity says with satisfaction. "What do you mean?" the doctor asks lightly. "Your one fear is to lose your mind," the entity answers with suppressed triumph. "So this is what I will do. I will take away your rational mind, leave you a random, insane shadow of yourself, a husk, a caricature of you, with no real meaning. But somewhere in there screaming, a part of you will remember what you once were. That part will fear its eternal imprisonment, fear the continuing degradation of the legacy of the sane you by the insane you, fear the harm you might cause others." The doctor struggles hard not to show that this threat has struck home. He turns from the entity and clasps his hands behind his back. Then he looks back over his left shoulder, a familiar, broad, unnerving grin upon his lips. "How do you know that hasn't already happened?" he asks mischievously. The entity pauses for a moment. "Don't play games with me, Doctor. I know who I have here." The doctor shrugs. And does he seem to you to react in a normal, rational way? The entity makes no reply, so the doctor continues. After all, I didn't succumb to any of the usual emotions you'd expect from anyone else put in the situations your mind created. Surely any sane person would. The entity is not so easily convinced. But I can see your personality, trapped here within my mind. I can remove the rational part I perceive. The doctor holds up a warning finger. Ah, but even you admitted that you only have a partial view of this mind of mine. How do you know that this is not merely the shattered remnants of a once noble and logical mind, and what you perceive, as the rational part, is just some shoddy glue, holding the fragments together in a gruesome parody of the original? For all you know, somewhere in this mind, there is a part that remembers how it used to be and screams constantly for release. The entity now wails, and tears of frustration choke its voice. I will not be cheated this way, it cries. I will remove it, glue or not. I'll shatter you once and for all time. The doctor runs his thumb and forefinger down his nose thoughtfully. I'm sure you could do that, he says mysteriously. And why shouldn't I? Snaps the entity. The doctor looks around him once again. This is all in your mind? He asks rhetorically. Yes, agrees the entity. The doctor then gestures with his hands from his head to his toes. Then this is all in your mind as well, he states. No! The entity screeches, once again whirling about the doctor before settling down. But yes, the doctor assures it calmly. You cannot deny that I now exist in your mind. What evidence have you that I have any other existence? The doctor feels himself gripped by a giant invisible hand, pinning his arms to his side, while lifting him an inch off the ground. He cannot deny to himself how real this feels, and he feels a thrill of fear as he struggles for breath against this constricting force. The entity speaks to him now. Do you really think you are not here? I doubt it. The doctor somehow finds the air to speak. The issue is not really what I think about this, but what you think, because ultimately that is all there is to this. The entity relaxes its grip by the tiniest fraction, allowing the doctor easier breathing, but it does not allow him to continue speaking. You cannot double-talk your way out of here, it insists. I can see you, you foolish little man. You're lying on the floor of your vessel with that ridiculous metal dog fussing around you. I can see this, and I have you here under my control. The doctor considers this information. So you are actually there, physically yourself, he asks. Not in any physical sense, but then that is not how I exist now in any case, the entity responds. So you can't go over and give my body a good kick, just to make sure I'm there then? The doctor asks. No, but this is irrelevant. My senses still show me you are there. I have no worries in that regard. The doctor frowns. But you just admitted you have no real contact with the physical world. Surely, then, there must be at least the tiniest grounds to doubt the validity of your own senses, divorced as you are from the real world. No! The entity roars, gripping the doctor tightly once again. But will you not even listen to yourself? The doctor gasps. What do you mean, listen to myself? The entity sneers. Allow me to explain and it'll become clear, the doctor requests. The only real evidence you have for my lying unconscious on the floor of the TARDIS is the images provided by your senses. These images exist within your mind, yes? The entity pauses, thinking. Yes, comes the reluctant reply. And the only evidence for your senses are these images in your mind. Again, the entity is forced to concede the point. And so, in reality, your senses and their method of verification are both in fact generated by your mind. No, the entity growls. The doctor can see it crouched down slightly, as if it might launch itself at him like a tiger. And so everything you perceive or think you perceive is exactly that, just thought, your thoughts. And that doesn't just include those images you believe to exist beyond yourself, the TARDIS and the universe through which it travels, but also those images generated here. These, even you concede, are generated entirely by your mind. No, The entity whimpers. The doctor can now feel the hold on him loosen considerably, and his feet are once more touching the ground. And if I am in fact only existing within your mind, then I am in fact merely another product of your mind, a fragment, if you will. No, the entity pleads softly. The doctor can now move his arms, although a little sluggishly, as if through treacle. And this fragment of your mind has a personality distinct from your own. This is clear, since you, or the part of you that identifies itself with you, is arguing, tormenting, and interacting with this fragment, named the Doctor. But this naming is only a way of separating one image, one part of yourself, from that which you want to believe is you. Any way you look at it, this must be a split personality. No, the entity whispers. The doctor shakes himself and finds his movement unfettered. Now in the blackness, a rectangular opening of pure white light appears. So it would seem you have two choices, the doctor continues. Either you can continue with this plan and condemn yourself to an eternity with an insane fragment of your mind, the entity sobs, and thereby condemn yourself to eternal insanity, the entity sighs with grief. Or you can let me walk through that door, the doctor concludes, gesturing towards the blinding white rectangle. The entity makes no further sound. The doctor wonders if he might now be crushed to the size of a pinhead, and he feels that one thing the entity wants from him, fear. He walks slowly towards the door. No response still from the entity. It seems trapped by fear. On the one hand, the fear of losing the doctor screams at it to act and stop him from leaving, while on the other, the fear of suffering the same fate as it is intended for the doctor stays its hand. In this condition, the mind of the entity seems to flicker like a faulty neon sign, trapped between two states, ineffective. The doctor looks back once, but his dazzled eyes can make out no shapes within the darkness. Then he passes into the light.